All right, David, I turn to you first because the Wall Street Journal editorial board published this. I want to have it exactly right. Trump pardons the January 6th cop beaters. Law and Orders, back the blue. What happened to the GOP? Any idea? That's the Wall Street Journal.
Right. And I think it goes deeper than that. If you listen to Donald Trump's conversation with Sean Hannity.
And Sean was trying.
He was trying.
He was.
And I think we have to be careful with our words, but millions of Americans tonight think that Donald Trump is a demented, unwell, sick person who is dangerous to the Constitution, dangerous to the country, and should not be president of the United States. And they don't do that out of fear-mongering. They do that because in his first administration, he ultimately excited the violent mob to go to the Capitol. After leaving office, he misused classified information. In his first 72 hours, he's violated the 14th Amendment, he's violated the impoundment clause, and he's pardoned cop beaters. Donald Trump is not a normal president, and I think even Sean Hannity was kind of pushing him on that. To your point, I think, what does that mean for all the other Republicans that elevate him and celebrate him? And their get-out-of-jail card right now is to say, yeah, but Biden did X, Y, Z. There is no parity between what Biden did and what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump pardoned violent convicts who beat up cops and law enforcement officers to try to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. I don't think Donald Trump really even understands that. I don't think he has the intellect to understand that. But all of the people on Capitol Hill who are backing him up right now do. And the shame and scorn that millions of Americans put on Donald Trump, they're putting on Capitol Hill Republicans tonight as well.
Okay, but to that point, right, Capitol Hill Republicans, many of them are using this both sides thing. Well, Biden pardoned all these people, but the specific people that Donald Trump is helping, experts have warned that clemency for Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, right, could fuel the threat of extremism. This is like Donald Trump creating his own private militia, and these people are fired up. Shouldn't we be concerned about that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm concerned about that, right? When we saw, as soon as they got out of prison, right, we saw Stuart Rhodes from the Oath Keepers, who was there, actually went to Capitol Hill. We saw the Proud Boys marching in Washington on the day of the inauguration, even before these pardons had happened, right? These are organizations that, if you go back and look at the record, A, were primarily responsive to Donald Trump's December 2020 tweet, in which he said, you know, come to Washington on January 6th for the protests, it'll be wild, and B, actually planned how they were going to engage in acts of violence to try and keep him in power, right? That's why they were convicted on seditious conspiracy charges, right? They were the people who were there specifically to be violent in defense of Donald Trump's power. And Donald Trump said these people get commutations and or complete pardons, as in the case of Enrique Tarrio, who is the head of the Proud Boys. And that sends this message. It unquestionably sends the message that if you take a violent act on my behalf, at least in a space that can be pardoned, in Washington, D.C. or some other federal crime, you'll get the pardon. And, at the time, in between January 6th and January 20th, 2021, after the riot happened and while he was still president, there were questions like, okay, he didn't go that far. He didn't issue these pardons, in part because at the time we had Republican legislators who were saying this thing is abysmal and awful and we can't stand with that. And then over the course of 4 years, it got built into this. These are hostages and they're heroes and they're patriots and all this nonsense and garbage. And we end up where we are today.
Can I just point out a quick irony? The Senate, in passing the immigration bill that they just sent to Donald Trump, said they passed an amendment that said if you're an immigrant who beats up a cop, you go to jail. You're deported. You go to jail. But what Donald Trump says is if you're a white nationalist who beats up a cop in my name, you get pardoned. That's what happened this week.
How does all of this impact corporate America? Because after January 6th, we saw big companies of all stripes and sizes who never get involved in politics stand up and say, this is anti-democratic, we can't stand for this. They have all suddenly got amnesia, and company after company, until today, are lining up to do business with Donald Trump, to do business with this White House, because it makes good sense for them. Does a move like this suddenly have them scratching their heads going, I just did the cha-cha at Mar-a-Lago with a guy who let the Oath Keepers back out.
I mean, I think they're scratching their heads.
Because it's totally true.
They're scratching their heads very quietly, very delicately.
Their heads?
You see it in this Wall Street Journal editorial where the Wall Street Journal editorial page, like many, sort of centrist Republicans or business types, got behind Donald Trump on the grounds that this is going to be good for the economy.
Yeah.
We've seen everyone from Elon Musk to Jamie Dimon kind of say things like that. And they were kind of just trying to ignore this other thing, which is that Donald Trump and Elon Musk together really have made things a lot better for the far right, because on one side you have these leaders getting out of jail, like back on the streets effectively, which actually really hurt a lot of these extremist groups. On the other side, social media, which had kind of been closed off to the far right, is wide open. So it just like has totally changed the playing field for these groups. And I think that was kind of the point all along.
Easy to ignore them when they're sitting in jail. Wait until those groups get on the eat the rich tip. I don't think big business leaders are going to like that. Let's talk about immigration, though, because Donald Trump already pushing, sweeping changes. And he says, immigration won me the election. It's what the American people want. And he has somewhat of a point that the American people have moved further to the right.
No.
But have they moved where he's taken the ball?
Donald Trump won 49-48, and politics is the art of framing. So if you say that there's a criminal with an outstanding warrant who needs to be deported, 80% of the country will say, yeah, that's great.
90%.
Yeah, 90%. Yeah. If you say, I'm going to go to a school or church and rip a sixth-grade daughter away from her father, and neither one of them will know what their future holds, all of a sudden those numbers plummet in terms of what supports it. And I think what is obvious about what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are doing is the xenophobia and the dark themes of anti-immigration. He suspended the refugee resettlement program, one of the purest programs this country has, to bring in the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the homeless, the wretched refuse, to use Emma Lazarus' words in her sonnet on the Statue of Liberty. He suspended that program, and he abandoned the American ideals of what immigration actually looks like. And it's hard to see Donald Trump make all of these moves and not say he's responding to a very dark xenophobic calling. Everybody understands. Find the violent criminal who shouldn't be here and deport him. That's fine. That's not what Donald Trump's doing this week. Donald Trump is taking an anti-immigrant agenda that we've seen in Western Europe in the past decade and realizing, I'm going to build my second administration on this.
All right, I want to talk about natural disasters, because obviously we have these ongoing fires taking place in California. Last fall, major hurricanes in the South. And I want to share what Donald Trump said again tonight with his interview with Sean Hannity. Watch this about FEMA.
FEMA is going to be a whole big discussion very shortly, because I'd rather see the states take care of their own problems.
I'd rather see the states take care of their own problems. How do you think Republican governors are hearing that tonight?
Well, I think Republican governors in the abstract are like, oh, no. But I think Republican governors who know who Donald Trump is know that that doesn't apply to Republican governors, right? He's talking about California. He's talking about blue states. He's talking about New York and New Jersey. He's not talking about Florida. He's not talking about the Gulf Coast. He's talking about the opposition, right? And I think it's interesting, too. You were talking just now about immigration and the way in which the administration is saying, well, we want to make sure that the DOJ is going after state officials that aren't upholding federal law, which, of course, they can't do by established case law, Murphy versus NCAA. But what happened to states taking care of their own, right? Like he tries to have it both ways. All that is rhetoric about bashing California after the wildfires and trying to open the door for saying, oh, we're not going to do that, and it'll turn around on a dime when it's his people that need it.